Good morning, everyone. We studied this week the portion of Vaychi, and I'm studying from Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe's talk on the Torah portion, volume 20, second talk of Vaychi. The Rebbe is concentrating on the end, towards the end of the portion. We read about Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years. He feels that his days are about to end. He summoned his 12 sons, and he's blessing each one of them their own blessing. Everybody's familiar with that? Then we read about he dies, and the Egyptians cry and mourn his death for 70 days. And then Pharaoh allowed them to travel to Israel to bury him there. So far, so good. The Torah tells us how they carry the coffin or the bed of Yaakov. Says the Torah, chapter 50, verse 13, Vayisu oisoi bonov. His sons carried the coffin. Says Rashi, he had ordered specifically how each one of the children should carry. He divided them to 12 sons, 3 on each side, east, west, north, and south. And later on in the desert, where they carry the tabernacle and they traveled as an entire Jewish camp, they encamped around the tabernacle in the same order which Yaakov ordered them to carry his coffin. This is Rashi, and this is based on the Talmud. But Rashi goes on to say, and the following is going to be the discussion. Rashi adds that Yaakov said, Yosef should not carry my coffin because he is a king, and king shouldn't do such a task. And another son should not carry my coffin, Levi. Why? Because in the future they are going to carry the coffin, the ark, the holy ark, and therefore they are sanctified to serve God. I don't want them to serve me. So those two are missing from carrying the coffin. Torah goes on to say, Vayisu oto banav, his sons, velo bnei banav, not his grandchildren. However, there are two exceptions, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe will be instead of Yosef, and Ephraim will be instead of Levi. So this way you have 12, 3 on each side. The spot where Yosef is supposed to be is Menashe, the spot where Levi is supposed to be is Ephraim. So far, so good. The Rebbe is asking, I don't understand. If you read about Yosef and Yaakov's last conversation before he dies, you know, when he blesses the sons, Yaakov says, Aseh imi chesed shel emet. Do for me a true, genuine act of kindness, which is, unsosani mimitzrayim ukvartani bikvoratam. Take me out of Egypt. Nasa Vayisu oto banav, lifting or carrying. He asked Yosef specifically one-on-one, you should carry me out of Egypt. And he says to him, with Rachel, that's why I explained to him, with Rachel, you mom, I didn't do it for a specific reason. In other words, he was demanding that Yosef should swear. And he says, Sim na yadcha tachat yerechi, put your hand under my thigh and swear that you will not bury me in Egypt and you carry me to Israel. So I don't understand. Later on, he says to them, not Yosef. What's going on? Says the Rebbe, it is not, therefore must be, this is the Rebbe's explanation, they were not taking their places. In other words, those grandchildren, Menashe and Ephraim, are not taking the places of two that were missing, but they were their agents, as if they themselves are doing it. Shaliach, instead of what do you call someone who is fulfilling a teacher missing? A substitute. They're not substituting them, but they are their agents. And therefore, Yosef carried, Levi carried, their sons carried. Menashe and Ephraim acted as their agents on their behalf. not just to substitute the void that those two sons. Now the Rebbe is asking another two questions. I understand Menashe carries is the agent of Yosef. After all, that's his son. You can do the job that your father is supposed to do. What's the connection between Ephraim and Levi? There is no connection. Two separate tribes. Levi is the one who decided to kill Yosef. The two, Shimon and Levi, are the one who talked to each other. Let's kill Yosef when he was 17 years old. And now you take a son of Yosef to be an agent on behalf of Levi? And the next question, I don't understand, says the Rebbe. Moshe is from the Levi tribe. He carried the coffin of Yosef throughout the 40 years. So Yaakov tells Levi, Yosef is a king. He cannot do it. Menashe should do it. Levi is going to carry the holy ark. Therefore, he shouldn't carry a human remains. I don't understand, says Rabbi. Number one, Ephraim and Levi, there is no relationship. Number two, Levi himself, Moshe, who is the tribe of Levi, is actually carrying Yosef's bones. Between Yaakov and Yosef, Yaakov is much greater. It's his father. Yet, Yosef, how come Moshe carries Yosef's bone? I'm sure he can appoint someone from Yosef's tribe. Yosef's tribe was split into two, Menashe and Ephraim. I'm sure there were plenty. Joshua, who's from the tribe of Ephraim. How about Joshua carrying? Why here there is no problem? In addition, the Rebbe is asking another question that's a fascinating question. The Rebbe said, I don't understand, Levi is going to carry the Holy Ark. You know how long? In how long? In over 100 years. How many generations would pass between Levi's demise until Holy Ark is carried? 4 generations. So because 4 generations later, he shouldn't carry the coffin. It just doesn't make sense. So again, we have a bunch of questions. The last 3 that we have here. A, Ephraim and Levi, what's the connection? B, if Levi don't carry Yaakov, how come Moshe carries Yosef coffin? And C, Levi is now carrying the Holy Ark is going to happen in 4 generations. So far, so good? Ali? Here is the way the Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe says that the Torah begins that the best years of Yaakov was in Egypt. How many years? 17 years. And Yaakov, Rashi says, why this Torah portion begins immediately after last one? If you look in the Torah text, usually new portions, most of them will have a line spacing. A space, a new paragraph, a new chapter. Some of them called stumot. Stumot means directly connected. If you didn't know it's a new portion, you'd continue reading. Because this moment Yaakov died, which is this week's Torah portion, all the pleasure and the freedom the Jewish people enjoyed have ended. Nistatmu, shut down, libam ve'inam shel Israel, the eyes figuratively and the hearts figuratively of the Jewish people. When Yaakov died, that's when the exile starts. It will take a couple of years, as we'll discover soon, until it's actually physical labor. But there is a change. No more tax break, no more VIP card. You cannot enter the palace anytime you want. It's over. This situation is not going to be. Therefore, says the Rebbe, Yosef and Levi had nothing to do with exile. Carrying Yaakov's coffin out of Egypt symbolizes the start of exile. Yosef, not only Egypt did not control him, he controlled Egypt. Egypt is the idea of what exile is all about. And therefore, Yosef was above it. As I said, not only they control him, he controlled Egypt. Levi, as we know throughout history, never was enslaved by the Egyptians. That's why Moshe and Aaron kept coming and going. They were not enslaved. In addition, says the Rebbe, the Medrash tells us, and it's both many places, that the exile, the slavery began only after the last of the sons of Jacob died. Anybody heard that? Yeah, Harry can vouch for it. Only after the last one died, that's when they started shutting down doors against the Jews. Who was the one who lived the longest? Levi. Levi is the last one to die. And therefore, as long as Levi is alive, there's no exile. When the exile began, so when Yaakov died, there was a first layer, first change. When Levi died, it's completed. Now they are going to start enslaving them very harshly. Therefore, Joseph and Levi do not belong to exile. If they did not belong to exile, they cannot carry the coffin. And that's why Yaakov says they shouldn't carry. We will soon see the deeper understanding, the Kabbalistic explanation as Yaakov gave the reason. Now we understand that instead of Levi and Jacob and Yosef, they needed agents to replace them, shluchim. Who are they? Menashe and Ephraim. Says the Rebbe, now we go to the Kabbalah understanding. Why do they need agents? Why Menashe and Ephraim needs to be there instead? If they don't belong to exile, and carrying his coffin symbolizes the start of exile, and they don't belong. Throughout history, they did not. Yosef was as long as he was alive. Levi as long as he was alive. Why Yaakov needs to replace them with somebody else to stand instead? You don't need them. Says the Rebbe. Exile is not just to break our backs. Exile is not just to hurt us. Exile is not to make us a bunch of slaves. Exile is a preparation for becoming God's slaves, to connect to God from a deeper level. To be true freedom, to experience and accept freedom, you have to experience darkness. You have to experience back-breaking labor and slavery. Therefore, in order for actual exile to achieve redemption, there has to be a person or a group who continuously remain connected to God, teaching the Torah. And these are the Levi tribe. In other words, Levi tribe were not enslaved, and what symbolizes carrying the coffin, not because they were exempt for whatever reason. It's because they were partners with the Jewish people. You need to have two types of Jews. You have a type of Jew who involved in good deeds. They earn a living, they build a temple, they pay for the poor, they pay for the taxes. And you have another part who engulf themselves, engross themselves in the study of Torah, connecting to God. In order for the Jews to be enslaved, there has to be somebody dedicating themselves to the study of Torah. And therefore, Levi, as long as because he was assigned the study of Torah, he did not experience exile the way the rest of them. Not because for external reason, but because that's how he ensures that exile is done in an appropriate way, that the Jews are constantly reminded, keep Jewish names, keep the Hebrew language, keep the holidays, be devoted to God. One day God will take you out. So they were there serving the Jewish people, and that's a partnership. And that's what Yaakov says about Levi. They will carry the coffin. In other words, they will carry godliness and the Jewish tradition, and therefore they are not to be enslaved. Enslavement for them is to be being partners with the rest of the Jewish people. Therefore, and as we see this partnership that express itself later on in the desert, that's why they carry the mission of serving God in the temple on behalf of the Jewish people. That's why in the Holy Land, they don't allow to own land. Why are they not supposed to deal in real estate? Because they have to be dedicated to God. That's why they're the ones serving God in the temple on my behalf and your behalf, because that's their mission, to act as partners. Therefore, says the Rebbe, now we can understand why they needed those two men as partners, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe and Ephraim were born in exile, unlike the other grandchildren, even though the other grandchildren were children of the tribes. Only Menashe and Ephraim remained steadfast in their connection to God, even though they were born in exile. but in the way they connected to God, the way their names denotes is two types of connection to God. Menashe, he named him Menashe, that God was able to save me out of my house, out of my father's house. Kinashani Elokim mi beit avi, from the house of my father. Ephraim is Kifani, God expanded me be'eretz onyi, in the land of poverty, in the land of no ethics and no proper behavior. In other words, Menashe and Ephraim, the names, one is still connected to his father. The other one is the future, where he's building up great accomplishment in the land of Egypt. Says the Rebbe, Yosef, there are two types of behavior to God. One is that when we go to exile, we try to remain steadfast, connected to God by connecting to our past, ignoring our surrounding, ignoring what's going on, and just doing what's right. That's one way. The other way is to be involved in communal affairs and inspire in the neighborhood and in the community to change, to become good. Menashe symbolizes Yosef. Yosef, he couldn't care less what's going on. He just did what's right. He served God. He refused to be assimilated by the customs and the lifestyle of the Egyptians. And that's what Menashe is about, because he's connected to his past. Ephraim represents Levi, the future, because the future is all about impacting the exile. Levi assisted the Jews in not losing who they are and doing good. By the way, that answers the question, how come Moshe carried the coffin of Yosef? Says the Rebbe, Jacob's coffin represents the beginning of exile. Moshe carrying out of Egypt the coffin of Yosef represents redemption. They are going towards the Holy Land, towards redemption. And therefore it's the exact opposite. So the only one who can do it is Levi, because Levi is the one who is separated to connect to God and be able to impact the rest of the people to do what's right. Did I make myself clear? So we had few questions. Why he says one is a king, the other is carrying the coffin. Why the coffin is going to be carried 4 generations later? B, why do they need 2 sons to replace them? And the answer is they're not replacing a space, not substitute, but they are agents on their behalf. And that explains why Yaakov make Yosef swear that he will carry the coffin, even though he didn't do it. He didn't do it, but he appointed an agent, a messenger on his behalf, an agent to act on his behalf. The question that it will take 4 generations later with carrying God's holy ark, and also that Moshe carried Joseph's coffin, based on Kabbalah, the idea that they should not carry is because they're above exile. When Yaakov dies, exile will start. Yosef never experienced exile. Levi, as long as he was alive, no one experienced exile. Therefore, they don't belong in exile. Carrying the coffin of Yaakov symbolizes exile. That's why by Yosef's coffin, Moshe carried, because Yosef's coffin represents redemption, going towards Matan Torah, going towards the Holy Land. That's that exemption. That's why Menashe and Ephraim are chosen to be the agents on their behalf, because Menashe and Ephraim denotes living in exile and still connected to God, either by connecting to our past or by having the strength to look into the future and not get scared and not learn from them. And Menashe is representing Yosef, who named him that way because he never forgot where he came from. Ephraim represents Levi, about the future, that they will always be above exile spiritually and mentally, because they will always remember that the future will be in Holy Land connected to God. And I hope I made myself clear. I want to wish everyone a good chance. What?